Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives, back today to discover from fresh perspectives with Caroline Brookfield. Caroline, welcome.
Thank you, David.
So, Caroline, just before we started, we were saying, what you're passionate about many, many things. So the thing that we thought we'd dive into today, because we haven't had anyone talk about this before, was the impact of using creativity to increase our comfort with ambiguity. So I want to dive into a number of those different aspects. But first, you are the first person we've had on this that's actually a vet, and not a veteran of wars and things like that, but rather someone that treats and helps animals heal. So maybe you can just tell me a little bit about how you got from that into whatever we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll dive into that topic specifically.
Awesome. Well, the ambiguity is that I am a veterinarian who speaks about ambiguity. So that is ambiguous in of itself. It's very meta. So my journey is that I'd always wanted to be a vet. When I hit high school, I loved performance and drama. And I was kind of like, oh, am I doing art or science? Like I felt like I had to choose. So fast forward many years later, I realized I was kind of missing something, even though I was finding a lot of joy and fulfillment as my job as a vet. And it wasn't until I connected my creativity with things like my entrepreneurship, like building a website or crafting a PowerPoint presentation and things like that, that I realized that it was when I was using my creativity that I felt most connected to my purpose and my job and the most fulfilled. And, intersect that with a job where I was speaking 80% of the time in a large company. I was like, I'd like to do something different. I like to do some speaking and facilitation. And I thought, people need to know about how creativity is so helpful and managing ambiguity, because jumping into new clinics and new jobs is something that I do all the time as a locum tenens. So I'm a self-employed veterinarian with ADHD, if you haven't immediately noticed that with my tangential speaking. But essentially, I love this idea of how creativity makes us feel better and happier. And then I learned about the impact of creativity on our ability to tolerate ambiguity and how tightly connected those two things are, and the evidence that shows that it can improve not only our mental health and well-being, but also our organizational performance and driving innovation and employee engagement. And that's kind of why I got passionate about these two topics and how they intersect.
Okay, that's great. So this I'm planning on this being a very interesting topic for me, at least, Caroline. So maybe we just start with ambiguity. Like when you say ambiguity, what do you mean, and where do we see it in our world today? So we can see why it's important to actually be able to deal with it. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I first started learning and researching it, there seems to be this confusion between ambiguity and uncertainty. So in a lot of the research in the medical field, they call it tolerance of ambiguity. And other research, they call it uncertainty intolerance. And so it is confusing, those two terms. And the way I describe it is that ambiguity is something inert, like it's something in the environment. It doesn't care whether it's ambiguous or not. So an image is either up or down. Remember that dress that people are like, is it gold? Is it green? Like that is something that's ambiguous, like it's inert and it doesn't care about what we think about it. But when we see something that's ambiguous, like that dress, if we don't know which color it is, it creates like this threat response in us, and it makes us feel uncertain. And so uncertainty is the emotion that we feel in response to ambiguity.
So I still want to dig a little bit more into ambiguity and make sure that my understanding of that is close. So when I think something is ambiguous, is that there's, we desire to have clarity and certainty, and so something's right or something's wrong. And ambiguous to me means that it's not really clear what the answer is. It could be either. Is that fair?
Yeah, ambiguous means it could be many different things. It's not entirely clear what it is. Like, that image of the faces with the vase, where if you look one way, it's two faces looking at each other. You look in the other way, it's a table or a vase. Like that is an ambiguous image because it has many different solutions and not one of them is right. So ambiguity is really more than one answer.
So I wonder why it is that people, and I'll include me as as a people, are are sometimes uncomfortable with ambiguity, or under what circumstances are we okay with ambiguity, and when is it important for us to try to resolve that, if there is a way to answer that question?
Oh, David, you are speaking my language. This is deep. We can go deep. How much time do you have?
Oh, okay, we got lots of time. Go deep. We'll make this 4 episodes if we have to.
So, one of the research publications that I was fascinated by early in my journey is from the University of Queensland. And they have determined there's three different dimensions of ambiguity tolerance. One of them is specific to the workplace, and then there's two other ones. And essentially, we see ambiguity in nine different ways.
Wow.
So, we can see ambiguity as our comfort with shades of gray, meaning like if you're not really sure if it's going to rain or not. Are you going to freak out? You're going to be stressed? Or are you going to be like, I have to plan? Like, that's one dimension of ambiguity. Another one is social ambiguity. So we're going, when we met at a conference, if you go into a conference, how uncomfortable are you not knowing how people are going to react to you and the interactions? Are you rehearsing what you're saying to people ahead of time? That's a dimension of social ambiguity. And then there's a dimension of desire for complexity. Like if there's a problem that presents itself, are you the person that jumps in and wants to get to the bottom of it? Or are you more like, I'll just take like whatever simple solution seems okay? And that's another dimension of ambiguity. And then the last one specific for the workplace is managing the uncertainty, which is what I'm really bad at. And David, less than 10% of people are comfortable with ambiguity. Like most people, and those people are not loving ambiguity, they're just more comfortable with it. So across the board, people don't love ambiguity. And the managing the uncertainty part for the workplace is the one I'm kind of weak in. And that is, how can you look at ambiguity as an opportunity? How can you put structures and systems and steps in place so that you can move an idea forward, but also be flexible to change if needed? And so those people are usually the organizers, and they're the people that can take this ambiguous, kind of uncertain future and kind of start putting it into a process. That's one I'm not so good at.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going all over the place here because I don't know if I have ADHD. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Maybe I should get clarity on that. Maybe it's ambiguous.
Maybe we should talk about that instead. That would be
Yeah.
very ADHD thing to do.
Exactly. A lot of these podcasts end up being therapy sessions for me. But so what I'm wondering about is how much of our response to ambiguity is conscious versus unconscious. Like, do we choose that we're okay with ambiguity in this case, but not in others, or what's going on in our brain that allows us to respond differently? How much is it about breaking a habit, or is it just about being more aware of it?
Well, all of those things, David, you kind of hit the nail on the head. So, a lot of times we're aware of ambiguity, like a merger or a change in leadership or a move or something like that. And we can feel that sensation of change affecting us. But a lot and most of the ambiguity we see on a daily basis is below our conscious awareness. So, we react to it the same way most animals react. And use an example of, like, let's say you're a bunny rabbit hopping through the forest and you see something and you're not sure if it's like a bear or a rabbit, or is it a friend or foe? Is it someone that's going to eat you, or is it someone that's going to be your friend? And as a rabbit, you're going to start collecting information, like listening. You're going to, like you go into a dark room, you start listening, seeing, is there a threat? I'm not sure if there's a threat here. And you put on all your senses. And then very quickly, you're pushed into making a decision. And that decision is usually something that's worked in the past that's saved you your bacon. So for a rabbit, they're going to run because they're fast. That's what they do. And we're the same as the rabbits. So when we face ambiguity, whether it's conscious or unconscious, our instinct is to try to resolve that uncertainty, to find out if it's a threat or not a threat. And if we cannot resolve that uncertainty, then we choose what's worked in the past. And welcome to status quo land, David, right?
So how do we rate, like before, let's say if there's something adaptive or, helpful to be able to better respond to ambiguity, how do we raise our response to ambiguity to a conscious level? Because I mean, I don't think we can do anything about it unless it's conscious. So how do we become more conscious of it? And then we can dive into how creativity actually helps.
Yeah, perfect. And through this exploration of the data and my own experience of leading through ambiguity, because I am a veterinarian, but I work as a locum tenens and it's kind of like a sub. So I've worked in hundreds of like I jump into a team with no onboarding and it's full of ambiguity and I have to lead through a complex environment for life and death decisions. So it's kind of where my interest in ambiguity lies is because I have this adaptability and this strength in jumping into new situations like that. So I think the first thing is and that's my I have naturally high tolerance of ambiguity. So you're right on the head. Sorry, you're right. You're very much on point with the idea that we need to be aware of it because we often don't have an awareness of it. And so I've developed this like 3C methodology. And the funny thing is, it's almost like you prepared for this and, we talked ahead of time, which we didn't, but I'm just like blown away by your questions because they're just leading me to exactly where I think we need to go. And that is the first one is to catch on, to have awareness. And what I do with audiences and people when we work together is I put them into mildly uncomfortable situations and I ask them to recognize their body reactions and their thoughts. So, one example I'll do, like when I'm doing a keynote, I'll get people to stand up and I'll say, like, what's your body doing right now? I don't know for you, David, but for me, when I'm uncertain, it could be if I'm like standing at the top of a ski run or I'm picking up the phone to call a pet client with like some data and some uncomfortable news. I get this like tension in my lips and I get kind of shaky in my hands and I feel kind of like not on the outside but on the inside I kind of feel like I'm watching a tennis match. I kind of feel a bit jittery. And what I work on, and it's a work in progress always, is oh, wait, I'm feeling those a combination of physical sensations or that urge to sit down or to go back to my comfortable position. And when I feel those, I think, am I feeling uncertain? And then the next question is, am I going to die? Because that's important to know. And if I'm not going to die, then I need to just stop for a moment and kind of like you're saying, drive that awareness. Or if you don't feel those sensations, just think, trying to build that thought of, do I know the right answer here? And one of the ways that we can be aware of this pull of ambiguity is through the work of Jennifer Mueller, who says if we have a strong negative or a strong positive reaction to something, we often are being pulled into this bias of what I call intuition. Like what's the difference between intuition and bias? So if you're in a situation, for instance, David, what I'm trying to say is like, let's say you have a situation. I'm like, hey, David, let's go jump off the CN Tower. And you're like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And it is a stupid idea, but just for example's sake. But if you find yourself saying that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, or that's the best thing I've ever heard, then it's a good chance that you're feeling that way because you're biased against this. You're being influenced by ambiguity and you're trying to choose a status quo solution that feels comfortable.
So there's an interrupt there.
Yeah, try to interrupt. Yeah.
So sorry, you said there were 3 C's. So catch
Yes.
on.
Catch on's the first one.
Second one.
Is consider data. I'm
Okay.
still in the process. Consider data or collect data, but the second step is about being mindful. That's
Okay.
that taking a breath and realizing that when we're reacting in ambiguity to status quo solutions, we're doing that because we feel threatened. Anything we see that's ambiguous or makes us feel uncertain is a threat.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be bad. Like, let's say you have that boss that's always yelling at everybody and not very nice. Imagine they ask you to come into their office for a slice of chocolate cake. Threat.
What?
That's a threat.
Yeah, because probably poison.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Or you're getting fired or something, right? So that's the challenge is that whenever we're faced with ambiguity, we react quickly. We react in status quo solutions because we're feeling threatened and we think we're going to die. So that's why the second question is, am I in danger right now? And if I'm in danger, then maybe just react, right? Like run away or do whatever you need to do. But 99% of the time, we're not in any danger. We're making decisions about our organizations, our family, about our marketing, and we don't need to make that decision right away.
So we've got catch on, connect or collect data, and then choose. Is that the third C?
No, but you're like batting 1,000, and it's create a new
Okay.
solution.
Great. Okay. So I want to get into that creativity in just a sec. But first, I'm thinking about ambiguity and I'm thinking in your role. And it seems to me that in your role as a veterinarian, there's kind of, especially doing locums, two different types of ambiguity. There's when you go into a new clinic and how are things done and what's clear and what's not. But there's also the ambiguity as a profession where you may get information from different tests where there's not a clear answer as to what it is. And yet you have to make a decision about how to treat that animal. Is that fair? Those are two quite different types of ambiguity, or are they all sort of the same?
No, I mean, there's probably even more than 2 types of ambiguity. If you look at the 9 dimensions through the work from the University of Queensland, for instance, there's social ambiguity. How's this team gonna react to me? How's the client gonna react to me? There's complexity, like many different pieces, like how do they run things here? Where do I send the test? What tests are available? How much money does the client have? Like those are all problem-solving complexities. And then managing the uncertainty, like how do I develop clarity for this new team so that we can work together through these problems? So there's like probably all 9 dimensions, I would guess, of ambiguity in that situation. It's high, high ambiguity at that point.
So it's a good thing you enjoy it or you tolerate
Yeah.
it well.
Yes.
So let's
And there are many veterinarians who try to be a locum because they like the idea of being more flexible. Like I'm self-employed, I create my own schedule, that kind of thing. And people think it sounds great, but there are many people who do not do it well because of that high amount of ambiguity. And it's difficult to, stretch yourself because it's stressful.
But I'm still wondering about so that's a lot of the social ambiguity. I'm wondering though with the animal, with the patient in front of you, when there's ambiguity of results that don't lead to a particular conclusion, but yet a treatment is required because the steady state, the current state isn't good for that particular animal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's ambiguity. And I'm trying to think of the name of that one, but that would be the idea of moving forward with incomplete information. So making
Okay.
a decision.
Okay.
And in fact, that's very well studied in human medicine, where they look at human physicians with high tolerance and low tolerance of ambiguity. So physicians with a low tolerance of ambiguity do what they call overdiagnosis. And
Uh,
so they'll run every single test available because they want to be certain. And that's that certainty you're talking about you're chasing.
mm,
And that's not good for them. Those physicians have lower mental well-being, and it's not good for patient care either because you get spurious results. Because sometimes the more tests you do, the more like, what does this mean? And it's probably irrelevant to the problem that you're chasing, but then now you've got to look at that and resolve that. So it gets very murky. So being able to move forward with just enough information,
mhm.
um, but you'll never get certainty because even if, 99% of dogs with whatever disease present in one way, there's always an outlier. In fact, there's a funny expression we say, I don't know if they say it in human medicine, but they say there's all these like kind of cliches, and one of them is they don't read the textbook, So if there's a dog that's like their disease isn't manifesting in the way you expect, you're like, well, they don't read the textbook. And so that is tough. That's a very tough thing to
Mm.
do, especially in this world where certainty is more sure. Like I started practicing in 1997. There was no internet, half the stuff I was treating, like, you had to look it up into textbook. And now I have information on focus groups and Facebook groups where people will report these new syndromes and new things so you can keep up to date easier. But at the same time, people are used to certainty now with Google. And so they don't like, it's very difficult for a pet owner to move through that uncertainty. And, people will struggle with the financial decisions about treating their pet and should they do the test or shouldn't they do the test. And, I've said to people with all of the compassion in my heart, like, when they say, do I need to do the test? I'll say, well, I'll tell you if you needed to do the test when we get the results of the test. Like, like and the challenge is, David, we judge our decisions by the outcomes. We don't judge our decisions by the information we knew at the
Right.
time, which is what makes moving through ambiguity so hard because we don't want to look back and regret our decision.
So then let's dive into the third C that I was incorrect initially, but it's about creativity and maybe you can just talk about what you mean by creativity because I know some people put a judgment around that. I'm creative, I'm not. To me, if you're doing something the first time, you're creating something that is an act of creativity. without the judgment, right? It's moving forward. So when you're talking about creativity in the sense of how it helps increase your confidence in moving through ambiguity, what are you talking about with creativity there, and how does it help us get more comfortable moving through ambiguity?
Yeah, and that's it's a complex topic. Um, but I guess the idea is that first of all, to your point, often to clear this up, people think creativity is something artistic or something like that, and it is not. Creativity is basically problem solving. It's imagining something and putting it into practice. That's creativity. Like, how am I going to build a pivot table so that it takes 10 minutes off my report generation? That's creative. How am I going to build a life where I can pursue my keynote speaking dream and enjoy veterinary medicine? That's creativity. Like, creativity is taking on a sole proprietorship to work as a vet so that I can manage my schedule. Like, those are all things that are creative. So to clear that up, and then if you think about it, anything you do that's creative, let's just take a simple example like painting a tree. When you go to paint a tree on a canvas, you have no idea what it's going to look like until it's done. If you like to cook and you want to experiment with different spices, you don't know what that dish is going to taste like until you actually try the thing and create a new dish. And so anything creative is stepping off of this security of certainty and into the unknown, not knowing how it's going to work out. It might fail, and it's moving through ambiguity.
So I'm gonna keep pursuing my curiosity here, and because after all, this is fairly arrogant to say it's my podcast. If I want to be creative, I'll be creative. I don't know about the people that are listening. So I'm kind of thinking that creativity could be used to either resolve something that's ambiguous, or it could be used to move through ambiguity. And I don't know if those are the same or just semantics, but
I
how
hadn't thought
does
of it that way, but that's actually a really good point. So, exercising our creativity, and the research shows that creativity is the one factor that increases your tolerance across all 9 dimensions. So, it's kind of a boot camp for building our tolerance of ambiguity because we're stepping into ambiguity with something that doesn't matter, unless it's, you're creating something at work. But when we're talking about the traditional creativity where we're exploring something artistic or something at home, it doesn't matter if your garden doesn't grow properly. Like, it's not a big deal. No one's going to get laid off or the company's not going to dive. So that is one dimension you're talking about, which is the building of the strength of it. But also, you're exactly correct. Creativity is a way to move through that ambiguity, to start to manage the uncertainty and put steps in place to try to find a new solution instead of jumping to the thing that's always worked in the past, which is our knee-jerk reaction to ambiguity.
So I don't know how you would measure this. I'm just thinking if you were hiring someone, you wanted to be able to assess their ability to create. Because it seems to how you measure a person's willingness to create, right? Because I think there's a willingness to do it, then also the ability to. There's some techniques associated with it, but part of that is a decision that I'm willing to create something new and not have to get stuck in right, wrong, and wallow in this ambiguity. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but
Well, what comes to mind when you say that is that number one, everybody is creative. Everybody has the capacity to be creative in a way that's unique to them. It might not be art, it might not be something like traditionally creative, like design, but even an accountant or someone very data driven can find a creative way to represent that data or to interpret it. So, number one, everybody is creative. It's what's holding us back. And sometimes we have an internal resistance because we're worried about what other people think of us. Like, oh, I'm an accountant, I shouldn't give this creative idea. And there's a lot of research around that there is a bias against that. So it's not unfounded. But oh, I'm an accountant, I should look like this, or I'm a creative, I should look like that. So part of it is our fear of being seen as something other than what we're supposed to be. So that's internal. And our fear of being wrong and failing. But the biggest thing is, especially if we're talking about organizations, is the organization giving an environment where people can exercise their creativity because they all have the capacity. They've looked at, should you hire external people to be creative? And it actually doesn't work. All you need to do is help the people you already have in your organization be creative, and you will start getting new ideas and more innovation. So I don't know if that answers your non-question with a non-answer, but that's what comes to mind.
okay. Well, then I'll decide whether to accept that or not later. It's a little bit ambiguous at this point. So So we can't do much about in this call anyhow about what organizations do or don't do. However, I think what would be great if we could say that a listener has just come into a situation where there's some ambiguity of some sort. So if you were to recommend maybe 1, 2, or 3 steps, what can you do now? So first of all, you're aware. Okay, that there's ambiguity there. So what's 1 or 2, a couple of steps that someone could take to help them move through that?
Yeah, so the first thing is being aware of it. The second thing is to stop and be mindful. So having a mindful practice or having a mindful mindset is helpful because you stop and think like, I don't need to react in this moment. I can take some time. And that's when you start collecting information and thinking about what your options are and what is the information I have here. So instead of just reacting, what evidence can I look for to help me make a data-driven decision about what to do next versus just react? So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing would be to try to remove that, because kind of think about a kindergartner, how a kindergartner would approach something, like take away that curse of knowledge and just think of like, how can I potentially move through this ambiguity in a way that will serve me and whoever I'm working with better than the knee jerk, like, no, that won't work, or that's a terrible idea, or we've always done it this way. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes. Yeah. So something else that occurred to me when you were talking about that is not is kind of what you want to be in the moment, but at the same time have a sense of what you want as an outcome. So what do we need to do now that I have choice around how to do that? So that's very helpful. So, Caroline, I'd like to thank you very much. I think we could probably have about another 3 hours of this conversation to dig deeper, but just scratching the surface on, what the value is of being creative and responding to ambiguity, and with some specific suggestions. So, thank you very much for that and for being here with us today.
Thanks, David. It was a blast.
David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives today with Caroline Brookfield. Hope you have a few things that you can try out after this call, and I look forward to the next time when you can join us. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.